In the days before the United States sent Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin to the moon, calls for justice were ringing out in the streets of New York City. The year was 1969. Only 5 years had elapsed since the Civil Rights Act of 1964 became law and prohibited discrimination based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin in public institutions. Unfortunately, even as landmark civil rights legislation sought to provide legal protections to marginalized groups, little had changed. For America's people of color, women, LGBTQ individuals, and those at the intersections, the era that took man to the moon did not bring lasting change for everyone. In spite of this, a number of leaders were paving the way for acceptance of all people and changing the cultural conversation about race, gender, and civil rights. These pioneers became some of the first women of color to advance in their fields: engineers and mathematicians, policymakers, Broadway playwrights, and activists. Even as forces of discrimination, like segregation and hate, worked against them, these dynamic women made important efforts to advance equality, and without their work, the efforts of today's activists might not be possible. To truly understand the accomplishments of these women, it is imperative to understand the institutional barriers they fought against and the historical context from which they emerged. We all hold a piece of the puzzle to changing the world for the better. As we fight against oppression like our foremothers, we can envision a future where everyone can reach the stars. In Laying the Groundwork, we will learn about activists, cultural icons, elected officials, and scientists of the mid-20th century whose work laid the foundations of modern-day activist movements. Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson. In 1969, the modern lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer LGBTQ rights movement was born at the Stonewall Inn in New York City. At the helm of the movement were 2 transgender women of color, Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera. These revolutionaries fought for LGBTQ equality at a time when the American Psychological Association considered homosexuality to be a mental illness. Even within the movement that the two made lifelong efforts to advance, Marsha and Sylvia were cast to the margins of the community and largely erased from its history. Marsha P. Johnson was born on August 24, 1945, in Elizabeth, New Jersey, and lived at the intersection of transgender, queer, and Black identity. Like many LGBTQ people of color, she was the target of discrimination and police violence. "I'm not missing a minute of this. It's the revolution." Sylvia Rivera. Sylvia Rivera was born on July 2, 1951, in New York City. Forced out of her home by homophobic relatives at age 11, Sylvia lived on the streets of Times Square, where she had to constantly dodge imminent threats of violence. She faced anti-LGBTQ discrimination throughout her life, but she refused to be anyone but herself. At the age of 12, while experiencing homelessness, she found a lifelong friend in Marsha P. Johnson, who had faced similar hardships as an LGBTQ young person. Like Marsha, Sylvia began engaging in sex work during adolescence to survive. LGBTQ youth of color are more likely to experience poverty and homelessness because of combined forces of racism, anti-LGBTQ discrimination, and the lack of dedicated resources. The struggles that Marsha and Sylvia fought against fueled a passion within them to provide shelter and resources to LGBTQ youth experiencing homelessness, a dream that they would work their entire lives to manifest. These 2 budding activists were only 23 and 17 when the Stonewall riots took place. These riots started on the night of June 28, 1969, with an encounter between local police and the patrons at the Stonewall Inn in New York City's West Village. Police entered the Stonewall Inn to intimidate and harass the bar's guests. Patrons like Sylvia Rivera carried with them years of trauma from police violence and confronted the blatant injustice with righteous fury. The night of resistance escalated into a full-scale protest, and many people were brutalized and jailed during their fight for respect. The Stonewall riots were the catalyst for an entirely new era of LGBTQ resistance, born out of a rejection of respectability, police violence, and discrimination. Today, the LGBTQ community pays homage to the uprising at the Stonewall Inn with annual pride marches and parades.